Okay. First agenda item is a call to order. The Commission on Equitable Housing and Development meeting is now commenced. It is November 4th at 4 p.m. This meeting is being held virtually due to COVID-19 to allow for social distancing and to protect the public health. As we continue our efforts in meeting remotely, we ask all commissioners and guests to mute yourselves until called upon to speak, to avoid feedback and background noise. For those of you who had dialed in using the call-in number, to unmute to speak, dial *6 on your phone. Also, prior to speaking, please announce who you are to identify yourself. As a reminder, this meeting is being recorded. We ask that you only use the chat function to request to speak or to announce that you are leaving the meeting so we can track quorum. Also, in order to comply with state open meeting laws, attendance and votes will be done by way of roll call, not by using the chat function. So for roll call, Michael Edmonds.
I am present.
Olga Flores.
Present.
Sharia Jimenez.
Present. Sorry, present.
Jim Tolfel, I'm present. Liz Wilson.
Present.
Jay Young.
I'm here.
Mindy Bernstein. Okay, Mindy is absent. Lori Mazurbo.
Present.
And Evangelina Paz. Evangelina with us? Okay, Evangelina is also absent. Our ex officio members, Maggie Amato Tejas. Wendy Asher.
Present.
Marianne Bierling. Marianne. Mark Clark.
Yo.
I like it. Vicky Casino.
Present.
Marcos Ismail.
Present.
Betty Villegas. Okay, Betty's absent. Corin Manning.
Present.
And Liz Morales.
I am here.
Okay, we have a quorum. So our second agenda item is our new member introduction, Evangelina Paz, who is absent. So I'm going to table this in hopes that she joins us at some point here.
And I do know she still has to do her oath. So she may join us at some point, but she may feel like since she's not yet official, she'll start joining after that.
Okay. Okay, third agenda item is the review and the adoption of the October 7th meeting minutes. Meeting minutes are available on our website. Are there any changes?
This is Vicky. I joined late. I missed roll call, so I'm marked absent. I joined about 10 to 15 minutes late.
We'll correct that.
Thanks, okay. Vicky.
You can adopt with that correction.
Okay, are there any other changes to the meeting minutes? Do I hear a motion to pass the minutes as presented?
I move.
Who was that?
Olga.
Olga. Olga has made a motion to approve the minutes. Is there a second?
I'll second. This is Jay.
Jay Young seconded. Any discussion before we put it to question? Okay, Michael Edmonds.
Yes, sir.
Is that a yes?
Oh, yes. I didn't know that you needed it.
Olga?
Sorry?
We're putting the approval of the meeting minutes to vote.
Oh, yes.
Okay. Sharia Jimenez.
Yes. Aye.
Liz Wilson.
Aye.
Jay Young.
Aye.
And Lori Mazurbo.
Aye.
Okay, the ayes have it. The meeting minutes from our October meeting are adopted. Okay, the next agenda item number 4 is a call to audience. This is the time when any member of the public may address the Commission on Equitable Housing and Development. Due to time constraints, the total time allocated for this is 15 minutes. Individuals are allowed 3 minutes each. Due to open meeting laws, commission members cannot discuss topics that are not on the agenda. Items brought up by the public may be considered as an agenda item for future meeting. So is there anyone who would like to speak? Yes, Joe Adino.
Thank you. I'm Joe Adino. I'm with the Barrio Neighborhood Coalition, Historic 4th Avenue Coalition, and I'm a Barrio Centro resident. And I just wanted to say 2 quick things. Number 1, I wanted to thank everybody from the city and everybody who showed up for the housing affordability strategy meetings last week. Those, the communication in that was very good. I wanted to commend everyone involved. I probably got better interaction from a 10-minute breakout section with Nona and Liz Morales than you know, I have in a session with people from the city about housing in a couple of years. So thank everybody for that. And the other one is I know that the subcommittee on housing segregation is still short of members, but I think we're having really good discussions there. I want to thank everybody for that. And I hope that as this commission looks at housing as a whole, I know we're looking at the needs of the community with regards to affordability in all aspects. And I hope that we also look at all of our policies to make sure that when we recommend, we're recommending policies that include a desegregation aspect in everything we do. So I think that makes that commission really important or subcommittee really important. And I hope we can do that going forward. That's all I have. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Joe. Is there anybody else who would like to speak? Okay. Hearing none. Our next agenda item is the tour information, which is on me. And Marianne, are you on yet? So we would like to propose Thursday the 18th or Friday the 19th to do a tour of the Newport at Amphi project and the downtown motor apartments. Those are on a Thursday and a Friday. And I believe we could invite a few people from Mayor and Council. So maybe Ward 1 and Ward 3 and the mayor, because it's in those districts. So I guess I'd like to put it out to the group. Does the 18th or the 19th work for you?
What time of day, Jim?
It's open. I was thinking 9 or 10 a.m., but I don't know that it matters. We could do the downtown motor lodge first, and then hit the Newport at Rodeo second, and try to do that around 3 o'clock after all the construction workers leave. Sometimes it gets loud during construction.
I'll just say I'm available both of those afternoons, but not in the morning.
Okay. Anybody else have a preference of one versus the other?
Jim, getting a message that the continuum of care meets Thursday afternoons, so might be better to avoid that as there's some overlap in membership.
Okay. Well, why don't we plan on doing Friday the 19th at what do you think? Maybe 1 o'clock. Does that sound good to everybody? Okay. So do we, as a point of clarification, do we need to make a motion on this, or is it just
I'd like just some clarification. This is something outside of the commission. It's like we're not going to have a open meeting or anything like that at that time.
I'll say we'll have to post it. We'll have to announce it in case there's more than 5 commission members, but there won't be any items discussed.
right? So we won't be taking votes or have an agenda per se.
And totally optional for folks.
Okay. Any other comments or discussions on that? Okay, so as a recap, Friday, November 19th. I just realized I can't do that. I don't need to do it, but if we did it a little bit later, that would be good. Does 2 o'clock work? Is that okay? Let's do 2 o'clock if that's all right.
How long is that going to take, you think? How long will it duration be?
I would say no more than 2 hours. Okay, so Friday, November 19th, 2 o'clock, we'll start at the Downtown Motor Lodge and we'll finish up at Newport at Amphi.
And Jim, I can work with you to send out some details for members before then.
Okay, that sounds good. Okay, anything else on agenda item number 5? Okay, number 6 is the subcommittee updates. First is the housing segregation. Jay?
Yeah, so we met last week, I believe, and we met for about an hour, and much of the subcommittee meeting was taken up by a presentation that I did where we looked at housing segregation in Tucson and Pima County, mostly a little bit in Phoenix, and how that relates to access to opportunity for folks, particularly as it relates to race and ethnicity. So it was really trying to lay some of the groundwork for the work that the committee is going to be doing. We had some really good discussion about, based on our segregated housing patterns, what kind of action might we be able to take both as a subcommittee and as a larger commission to address some of the issues. And we talked about meeting a little bit sooner than we would have, partly because of I think our next subcommittee meeting would have fallen on, I think, Thanksgiving. And we were also asked to potentially provide some input for a mayor and council study session that takes place on November 23rd, because in the HAST plan, there are some policy initiatives, particularly policy initiative number 3, that relate to fair housing and segregation, and particularly as it relates to citing affordable housing in areas of opportunity as opposed to areas of low opportunity. So we had a very productive meeting, and that's kind of where we ended. So our next meeting, I believe we have a hold on November 10th to talk about some of these issues and potentially think about what we might want to say to mayor and council during the study session on the 23rd. Lori, did I miss anything?
I think that was all of it.
Any questions for Jay? Okay, permanent supportive housing, Liz.
Hi, everyone. Happy to share a little bit about our meeting, but I may forget a few details. So those of you on the same committee, jump on in. We met on October 14th. We made primarily the agenda was around the housing affordability strategy plan and how permanent supportive housing fits into it. And one of the things that came out of it was a recommendation that that the group wanted to share with the overall commission. If it's okay, I'd like to share my screen. So to share what the recommendation is. Let me, and Liz and is Mindy on today? She isn't, huh? So let me, I'm changing from Teams to Zoom is always fun when you're trying to look for the share button. Let me know if you see it. Okay, this is actually not the one. Yeah, you know what though? That wasn't the one I wanted to share because I kind of made some tweaks to it. Hold on a second. Okay.
One thing we also reached a consensus on at the last meeting was changing the name from permanent and supportive housing to housing first. I don't know if we needed to have like a formal motion for that, but it was an agreement.
Right. And I think that I don't know that we need to, other than to see if our chair is good with that.
I think housing first is there's a program that's already defined as housing first. It's a homelessness strategy. Is that what you're talking about, Liz?
That is correct.
Okay. And so you want to change the subcommittee to housing? I'm sorry, say the question again. You want to change the subcommittee to housing first?
We had reached consensus on changing the subcommittee from being called permanent and supportive housing to housing first, because we're talking about a variety of housing types that aren't only permanent and supportive housing. At times, the goal is to address permanent and supportive housing generally using the housing first model. Did I get that right, Liz?
Yeah, and it's not a program. It's not tied to any particular place or community. It really is about an approach to how, and it actually lines up with mayor and council's goal of, if we're going to be serving persons who are experiencing homelessness, that everything we do should be with that housing first approach. So I think it does demonstrate a larger kind of goal around housing and how we deliver housing.
So that's a recommendation from the subcommittee to the commission. Is that correct?
It's actually a request to amend the name of the subcommittee.
Okay. So Liz, do you want to make that motion?
I will make that motion.
Go ahead.
I move to change the name of the Permanent Supportive Housing Subcommittee from that name to the Housing First Subcommittee.
Okay, we have a motion. Is there a second?
I second. This is Shay.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any comments or discussion?
Okay.
Hearing none, we'll call the vote. Michael Edmonds,
Yes.
Olga Flores,
Yay.
Shay,
Sorry, yes, I.
Liz Wilson,
Aye.
Jay Young,
Aye.
and Lori Mazurbo.
Aye.
Okay, the ayes have it. The name is formally changed.
Thank you. The next item that again, I started saying it and I couldn't find it. So this, when talking about the housing affordability strategy plan, and Anne's going to be talking a little, and I will talk a little bit more about it. The subcommittee went through this recommended strategy, or I should say action item. And our subcommittee is requesting that the commission look at adopting this and moving this forward to be included in the affordability strategy plan. And I just want to read the goal. It would be that HCD will conduct a funding process to request development of one permanent supportive housing project per year for the next 5 years. The proposed projects will need to serve persons experiencing homelessness. The proposals can request either up to 50 project-based vouchers or $500,000 in home investment program funds. The minimum requirements is commitment to using a housing first approach, serving individuals and families who meet HUD's definition of chronically homeless or literally homeless, participating in the coordinated entry system, that the target population should include, and I'm sorry, this target population number 2 actually replaces the sentence before as far as the target population. It should include people who meet HUD's dedicated plus eligibility as a priority pool. And it includes chronically homeless and persons who were chronically homeless but were temporarily housed, and the persons with a long-term disability defined as having high severity of service needs by the continuum of care. That's a very specific. And then the third, that the proposal demonstrates the ability to provide appropriate voluntary services for target population, and services are provided out on site. So our committee thought that this would be a good way to ensure that there are permanent supportive housing developments promoted and hopefully have at least one new project a year if this is adopted. And I'll put this verbiage in the chat box so everyone can see it.
So that's I'm gonna go ahead and speak on this if that's okay. It's very interesting. There's a lot of overlap on that topic and what was discussed in the affordable housing group. The only concern that I have is the city right now is saying that there's only going to be 50 housing vouchers per year. So it's basically putting 100% of the housing vouchers into one project, or 100% of the home funds into one project. And depending on how these are financed, we might be able to get multiple projects with those sources, as opposed to trying to put all of our eggs into one basket each year. So, I support the concept, but I think, can we look at the language again?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Jim, what you're bringing up was discussed a little bit in our meeting, because we did talk about opportunities for mixed income developments and not having it exclusively be permanent and supportive housing. And just because a housing project is permanent supportive housing does not mean it has to exclusively be Section 8 vouchers. It can be subsidy from other nonprofits in town or lookalikes.
And this also says it could be up to 50 project-based vouchers. It would not have to necessarily be all of them, depending on how that project-based voucher RFP is written. And again, 500,000. I know that the home program we would do at least 2, maybe 3 projects a year with home. So there could be opportunities if we have one project either doing PBV or home, there's other projects that could get them alternatively or additional home. So I don't think this is precluding from additional proposals that are not serving persons experiencing homelessness.
Mark? You're on mute.
I wanted to circle back around to where I think you may have been going earlier. Unfortunately, been around for a long time, and when I learned about Housing First, you know, a decade plus ago, probably maybe 2 decades ago, it really was a very intensive mental health related project where people would have assertive community therapy or treatment teams assigned to the housing vouchers. That's the way when Sam Simbaris and his colleagues in New York City developed that program. I'm gathering that's not exact. We're using maybe Housing First with maybe like a lowercase h, lowercase, as opposed to, I mean, the other way I would understand Housing First is people go into housing before they get service requirements attached to them. Is that more what we're talking about? Or do we really have commitments from behavioral health agencies to overlay very intensive mental health services, behavioral health services on top of participants?
So Housing First definitely was started by the great Sam Simbaris, who I met many years ago.
Me too.
Yeah, and the ACT model is definitely how it started. What we're talking about in Housing First and approach and the providing appropriate voluntary services, it's not necessarily the ACT model,
right.
But it is an on-site support service provider who has experience providing services to people and connecting them to the various resources like mental health and other things like that. So it is still with the idea that you have to have the wraparound services to ensure stability, but it's not a model where you have, you know, a nurse, a mental health professional, and a doctor all working. So yeah.
2 social workers, a vocational rehabilitation specialist, and a couple of peers. Yeah.
But if you look at most Housing First projects, at least that ones I've had worked with in Arizona, they're heavy on services, but not following that model that was in
right.
Mm-hmm.
So I was just going to say, sorry, Liz, I was just going to say that sounds to me more like permanent supportive housing than Housing First. But again, I've been out of the business for a long time, that particular focus of the business. So that's fine. I'm not trying to argue it.
Yeah, and the only thing I want to say is we're kind of confusing the name of the committee versus what permanent supportive housing recommendation here. We are talking about permanent supportive housing model or project with home funds or project-based vouchers and with a Housing First approach. So it's both. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
We also have a definition from like one of our first meetings. We have a series of definitions that are on the commission's website that includes Housing First.
So I have a question for Shay and for Ann. I missed the second half of the affordable housing meeting. We had this last time, but based on how that meeting focused on LIHTC and building additional affordable housing, does this, in your opinion, work with that, or is this going to fly in the face of that? I guess I'm looking for what are the pros and cons of this?
Well, can I jump in? I think I need clarity too on the difference between the PVVs and the just regular Section 8 housing, because I think when we put it this way, it seems like it's such a limited, finite resource, when in reality, a lot of people struggle to find housing who have vouchers. So I guess I think we need strategies for both PBVs and then the other type of vouchers that I forget what they're called, but they're like floating vouchers. They travel with the person, not with the housing site.
Yeah, so I can explain. So project-based vouchers have always been very critical to doing a lot of light tech projects want them, but in particular, when you're dealing with special populations like persons experiencing homelessness, having the project-based vouchers that are tied to the unit, not the tenant, ensure that you have a subsidy there that because they're going to usually come in with no income or very, very low income. So having the voucher to the unit often makes serving that population feasible for a low-income housing tax credit project. So the tenant-based rental assistance that is under the regular vouchers, that the person gets to take the voucher wherever they want to live as long as the landlord accepts it.
So are most permanent supportive housing projects funded with low-income housing tax credits?
The one most are, yes.
Most of them are, okay.
And that would be my input as well. I think understanding the difference is key, because my inclination also is that LIHTC, because you have such a bigger budget and that's what the program is paying for, that it's going to more than likely support the supportive, programming and the services that are needed. Whereas I think we could figure out another strategy for the housing choice vouchers but recognizing that it's two different animals and one might fit. I feel like the housing choice vouchers could better fit, the smaller scale development and incentivizing that in the community versus.
I'm going to tell you my experience is you can't do a PSH without some level of heavy subsidy because it's very expensive. Yeah. The service delivery is much higher than just what a standard low-income housing tax credit project does. So if we want to serve those who are experiencing homelessness, I'm fine with it being in a small scale or, doing, as Liz Wilson had mentioned, a larger project where they're integrated in with the other residents with mixed income. But it's just, I think it's critical that we understand if we want to do more housing for those experiencing homelessness, we're going to have to put some funding to those projects if they're going to be successful.
Liz Wilson.
Yeah, thank you. I think that also something we had discussed with this, I understand the concerns, a developer coming on and trying to do this single-handedly, but we had discussed this as being something that a pre-existing or even potentially new nonprofit takes on, possibly in partnership with the developer, so that they can manage the services on an ongoing basis.
Yeah. Mark, did you have another comment? Or is that leftover hand? Mark? I'm assuming that's leftover. Okay, Ann?
Jim, just answering your question, the way I see it, the discussion about supporting LIHTC can absolutely work with this. And I feel like the QAP already is prioritizing permanent supportive housing projects. So I think the way I view this is at least one of the, at least the project-based vouchers and or the home funding would go to supporting at least one permanent supportive housing project a year, which I do think is important in terms of the Housing First Subcommittee's goals. So I do think they're aligned.
Okay. Because one of the things I think that was discussed in the Affordable Housing Subcommittee was establishing a RFP process where developers can request assistance from the city for projects, and maybe this could be set up you know, to, if there's a point scoring category or something like that in the RFP, you know, there could be a priority given to permanent supportive housing project.
That is exactly how I see them working together.
Okay, so this is a recommendation. Is there something that we're supposed to do with this recommendation?
So if my recommendation is that the recommendation, I'm kidding, you consider if you have a majority that wants to include that for the housing affordability strategy plan, that be incorporated into the goals that are in that plan.
Okay, so is this a motion, or do we want to table it until we go through the affordable housing side? Or
I think that's totally appropriate to go through the presentation first and see if it meets everyone's
okay.
goals as far as what should be included.
Okay, so does everybody understand that? There's a recommendation coming out of the Housing First subcommittee to basically give priority to a permanent supportive housing project with the city resources. And we will go back and take another look at this after agenda item number 7. No, number 7?
Yeah.
Yeah, number 7. Okay, anything else from the Housing First subcommittee?
No, thank you. Unless Liz, since you're the voting member, was there anything else that we talked about? I think that was the main.
No.
Okay.
Any questions for Team Liz? Okay, next item is the Affordable Housing Subcommittee. Shay and Olga.
Sorry, we had a really lengthy, pretty technical discussion about the QAP. So I know it's not Mark. I know it's not everyone's cup of tea. So it was so thank you everyone for being patient with that one. The QAP is the Qualified Allocation Plan. So this is how LIHTC funding is awarded. It's for people who have never seen it. It's like a 100-page document. It's got a billion forms that you have to fill out, and it pretty much is really, really difficult to win one, not let alone apply for one. So the LIHTC application is also really unique because the QAP changes every year, and basically states and the cities within the state lobby for different aspects, so it'll maybe go in their favor, or whatever the political agenda is. So it's really it's something that I feel like Tucson, because it doesn't seem like we're really removed from Phoenix, but in a lot of ways we are, and I feel like don't have access to the state legislature in the same way Phoenix does. So this is, again, a really important political kind of tool that then affects how these projects get distributed. And the way it happens and works out now basically is that it's highly weighted in favor of Phoenix, and Phoenix gets most of these projects. And it's really weighted heavily, I think also biased a lot towards urban environments versus rural, although rural projects do have a set aside. And there's like different set aside categories within LIHTC. So if you're in a category that's not as competitive, it can be easier to get one of these. But yeah, it's a really important document, because ideally we should be weighing in on it and sending a letter in advance of when it's due, but we didn't quite have time to do that this year. So but it'll hopefully be top of the agenda next year. And the only other things we discussed, I'm trying to think, that was the main discussion. And then, yeah, that took up most of the meeting. We talked a little bit about the housing affordability plan as well, and brought that up, and we also talked about the vouchers and how, you know, those could potentially help, you know, win LIHTC projects, you know, for people who are going after those applications.
Thank you, Shay. Olga, do you have anything you want to add?
Not right now, thanks.
Okay, any questions for the affordable housing subcommittee? I'll just, if I can add, I'd like to add one thing, Shay, if that's okay. So,
please.
Yeah, no, I think, you know, it was a very tactical discussion that we had, where we went through the point categories in the QAP and talked about what are things that the city can do as part of the housing strategy to position ourselves in a more competitive light to Phoenix, because Phoenix obviously has a lot more resources, and so we have to be able to compete with that if we want to get projects down here. And I think it was a very productive discussion. We got a lot of really good input from people who are actually trying to do this in Tucson. Okay, anything else before we move on to the next agenda item? Okay, our 7th agenda item is the affordable housing, the housing affordable strategy for Tucson. And Liz and Ann are going to be presenting this. They have requested, so you all are aware, that we, as an organization, move to provide a recommendation that can go to mayor and council on if we approve of the strategy in this plan. And, you know, if there's a few specific items that we don't agree with, we can make that exception in the motion. But that's something that at the end of this discussion, they have requested that we do. So please be aware and ready for that. With that, I'll hand it over to Liz and Ann.
Liz, do you want to do an intro? Want me to jump in?
I don't think we need an intro with this group other than I will then. Let me just say this. This plan, as a reminder, was asked by mayor and council for us to come back after the last presentation we did around affordable housing. So we definitely looked at what we've already had, what we laid the foundation with the PCHIP document, and wanted to build upon that. I want to thank Ann and her team have worked really hard on this in a very short time frame. All of you have already provided some great input and participated in our public meetings we had already. So, but I want to be clear in that mayor and council wanted this commission on equitable housing and development to be very much an integral part of this discussion, of the recommendations. So, you know, of all the groups we talked to, and we had some really good discussions, as Joe talked about, it's urgent that we know that what this commission believes and wants to move forward. Mayor and council will look at your recommendation very seriously, and we'll look to you for additional help with us once we start rolling it out. So there's my introduction, Ann.
Thank you, Liz. So yes, we want to hear from you today. Do not hesitate. If there's anything I say as I move through this, don't hesitate to stop me and jump in. And also don't hesitate to stop me if there are concerns, questions, just anything on your mind. So many of you, thank you. I know many of you attended the sessions we had, and thank you, Joe, for your comment. So last week we held 3 sessions. The first was with a developer stakeholder session. The second 2 were general public meetings. One was virtual, one was in person. I haven't added up the numbers, but all in all, I'd say we had over 100 people throughout those sessions. And I feel like we presented drafts, draft policy recommendations based on the last couple of years of discussions, and have been refining them based on those conversations and continue to do so. So if this is a draft, and when we go to mayor and council on November 23rd, it will still be a draft. Our thinking at that time is making sure that mayor and council are on board with the recommendations and have a chance to provide feedback before we would ask them to formally adopt it. So long story short, the draft, don't hesitate to jump in. I did put the link to the website in the chat, and I'm going to share my screen and go to that website now. And a big thank you to Laura Sharp, who is on this call, who works at HCD and made this website for us. She does amazing work, and I think it makes it pretty easy in terms of laying out the information. So what's on the website now, and this website will continue to be updated, just an introduction to what the HAST plan is, which is what we're calling it, the Housing Affordability Strategy for Tucson. There is the draft plan, and this is a story map. Sometime the week, we're shooting for getting up an actual PDF of the plan, a draft PDF of the plan on November 15th, as we're providing a little more details. You'll see this, what I'm presenting today is pretty, we're trying to summarize and keep it simple, but the plan itself goes into a bit more detail. We have a spot that people can provide feedback on the plan and what's on the website. And then we have the virtual public meeting posted for folks that couldn't attend the meeting. So this here in the middle is how you open the story map, which has a lot of information. And I'm going to go over what's on here. I'm going to breeze through the introduction and the data because you all have seen that from me before. That said, it's looking a bit more like a plan, but it's the same information. So I am going to go through this really quickly, and then between Liz and I will really focus on the policy initiatives, as that's really the meat of the plan. So this is the introduction section, and the way the story map works, the top shows what sections to the plan there are, and you can jump between them. Right now, there are 5 sections to the plan, though the last section I'll say is still a work in progress. But there's the introduction, there's a data section, the policy initiative sections, which is the meat, a funding overview, and then there'll be some short-term action plans. In the introduction section, there's information on what we define as housing affordability. And we talk a lot about, we provide information on some key definitions of housing. And I will say, we have a glossary. Appendix A to the plan is a glossary of housing definitions. Liz, we pulled a lot from the document you pulled together, and we just feel like being new to housing, I keep hearing terms being referred to in different ways. I think the housing first discussion earlier is a really good example of people mean different things by the terms. And so we have a glossary that at least indicates what we mean when we say those words. This is a graphic that Liz shared with Mayor and Council talking about the housing continuum and housing needs in our community. And one of the things I want to be clear that what the housing affordability strategy is for and what it's not for. And so on the left side of that continuum are the strategies that are focused more on persons experiencing homelessness. And the city does have a lot of efforts in that space. And that's really where Tucson Pima Collaboration to End Homelessness has done a ton of planning and strategizing. We don't want to reinvent the wheel. And so our plan is not focused on that stuff. Our plan is focused on permanent housing and anything to the right of that. So just wanted to set the stage so that people aren't disappointed if they don't see a ton regarding homelessness. In the plan, we link to the TPCH strategic plan. The data section, this is almost, the data itself is what you've seen before. And so I'm going to breeze past this, and it looks like my internet is a little slow today, but there's information that shows population's growing. Since the Great Recession, the housing production has slowed and not keeping pace with the number of households. Incomes in Tucson are low, and there's way more information when you do. If you're looking at this on yourself, please know that a lot of the data charts have more than one tab, and you can dig into this a bit more yourself. So there is information on that, information on how many housing cost burdened households there are in Tucson, and how many households there are in different income categories. So incomes in Tucson are low, which correlates to poverty rates being high. All of these are issues that make it harder when you see how the housing costs are increasing. So this is information I shared before, and thanks to Betty and some others, we did add Pima County here, just so that the data is shown both ways in terms of rent increasing and typical home values increasing over the past 5 years. And I think this and the next slide are really the summary of the data and why there is such a concern. And so here you see in 2017, the annual median rent was $860 across different sizes. And then today it's in Tucson, it's 1,208 is the estimated rent. So that increase is pretty staggering. And then, not surprising to anyone probably, in terms of incomes have been going up a little bit in Tucson, but nowhere near the cost of housing. And so continues to make the challenges greater. And then did add a little bit, Liz, thanks for your feedback. And I do have in the write-up more on the percentage increase, but we did change this a little bit to think through the rent by different sizes corresponding to the number of households, which makes it way easier to see the percentage. We say housing cost burden is 30%. You can see here if this person's making $13,000 a year, and I can't remember, I did this once already. And if they're paying $842 for a studio, that's $10,000 a year. So just thinking through what that percentage is, and we'll have information in the report on what that percentage is. And then there is this is from the housing market study we did with U of A. These are actually the same information, just shown two different ways, as we can understand how this one might be a little intimidating to folks. But it helps to show the income categories in Tucson and how many units are available at those income categories. And then here are the takeaways that at least I take away from this information, that the extremely low income, the most low income households, there is not enough housing for the extremely low income households. And one of the challenges, not surprising, is many of the higher income households take the rents at the lower household rates, and so creating even more of a crunch. And that's where thinking about housing strategies, I do think market rate housing really can help as well. HCD's focus is on affordable housing, but market rate housing can help our housing situation as well. And then the housing cost burden data shows that in Tucson, over 75,000 households are housing cost burdened. And so thinking through needing housing solutions for over 75,000 households in Tucson that are paying more than they can afford. there is some information on housing segregation and some data, and you've seen this map before. This, I think, really does paint the picture on how segregated our housing pattern is in Tucson. And then last is homeownership disparity rates. And so in Tucson, and in the country, you can see Tucson is orange, country is green, or sorry, or both orange, different shades of orange, but you are much more likely to own your household if you are white, non-Hispanic than any of the other categories. And so that is the data section. Again, happy to take comments, feedback, thoughts, but really we want to talk through the strategies more. Anything before we jump into the meat of the plan? Thoughts, concerns?
First of all, I want to say this looks amazing. So I just want to express a little bit of concern about people who might have different types of color blindness being able to read the graphics just because the colors are so similar throughout. I think they're beautiful, but if you don't have a full range of being able to see various colors, then I'm just curious if that would impact someone being able to read the data.
I'm wondering, Vicki, if you have any feedback there.
Yes, and I'm not sure how you're sharing it. The font looks really small too, but if it's an accessible electronic document, people can blow it up. The colors, it would be much better if there was higher contrast. And choosing, they're all in the oranges. So if you make one of them a different color, and anywhere, I don't know if you have text on color, but anytime, like here, you just have to be careful about the contrast. You want really high contrast. So that black on that gray could be another area. If the gray could be lighter.
Okay, that's good feedback.
Yeah.
Some of it, this particular one we took from the U of A study, that might be harder, but some of it we do have control over.
Yeah, and I don't know how it was created, but a lot of programs now have an accessibility checker built in usually under review. It just depends on the program, but if you want help with that, I can help offline.
Great. I appreciate that. In particular, thinking about the PDF and making the actual report something that people can see.
Hey, Ann, can you go back one sheet? This is going to seem like a nitpick. Actually, go back to the one that says construction worker there.
Oh, this one?
Yeah. I would prefer to not show construction workers at 80% of the AMI. There's a grassroots effort happening right now across the state to implement Davis-Bacon wages for any public works project. But the problem with the definition is any project that the city would donate money to would be considered public works and would kick in Davis-Bacon. And it ultimately ends up really hurting affordable housing. And I just don't want to add to that narrative. And I frankly think most people in the construction industry make more than $40,000 a year.
And what we can possibly do, Jim, so this was data on common occupations in Tucson that does summarize the amount. It is almost 2 years old now. And so we can look at another category that's similar, as there's a lot of them.
Yeah, I just don't want to add to the narrative that construction workers need to get paid more, because I think it's going to hurt affordable housing. And I don't think in general that they need to live in affordable housing.
And
Joe?
Yeah.
I wanted to ask Ann if I could about that screen that was the gap analysis summary, the multicolored one with little squids going everywhere. Oh, you were just there. There you go. You kind of mentioned that there was an implication that higher income houses were taking the lower price dwellings. And I see really every group has lines going to informal dwellings for unknown rent and multifamily unknown rent. That one, you know, the 50, the 500, 875 really looks like it's composed of the two lowest income groups. Is that, I know that if you're talking about higher income taking, you know, less expensive housing, there's an implication that you can build at all levels and have some filtering happen. Is that what you're getting at? And if so, how does that graph show that? And
so we talked about this graph for a long time, and Corin, feel free to jump in. The informal dwellings and the multifamily units, what we didn't want to do is make too big of leaps and say, based on what we had data for, there was a missing number component. And based on where they're located, the size of them, they fall within the 500 to 800. It's somewhere in the middle there, we believe the average of those would be. But without the data, we didn't want to put in a guess. And so the majority of them are between those brackets. So based on that has been one of the conclusions, is part of the crunch is people taking units that they can afford, and even what they can afford more, they could afford more than what they're taking. And so, and Corin, feel free to jump in. It was over a year ago that we were diving into those conversations.
That's exactly it. And I think the point from this was that we have a lot of moderate income households that are competing with the lower income households for housing. And, you know, they're generally, a lot of them are in housing that is, you know, you could say more affordable than they need, although that's, you know, obviously relative, and there's a lot of other factors. But that the lowest income households, not only is there not enough housing, there's just not enough units, but then they're also competing for those units with higher income households.
Gotcha. So the informal dwellings and multifamily unit ones are ones where you saw that the data wasn't adding up between, you know, those households and the amount that you had documented. So that's kind of a best guess.
Yeah, and from the data, again, it's been a while, and I'm happy to look into this more and talk to you more, Joe. We got tax information from Pima County. Some of what there wasn't information for are those, in terms of rents, are the ADUs, manufactured homes, and units that tend to naturally be more affordable. And so that's why we put them at that part of the graph.
Okay, I didn't want to take everybody's time going too far in depth on it. Thank you, and Corin.
No worries, I'm happy to follow up with you on it. And I see Shay has a question.
Yeah, just real quick, I guess part of this, what this gets into is, was there any analysis of kind of what's happening, understanding the ecosystem of kind of development and predatory, you know what I'm saying, predatory development, like understanding those cycles, because I think there's also a lot of concern that everyone from California is also buying us out, and you know, also we're competing with folks, you know, with that type of housing. I mean, within the market, is there any kind of, as well as, you know, people also look negatively on flippers, but sometimes I feel like flippers also are producing a higher income. You know, there's just all these perceptions people have about development, and I don't think it's always good or bad. It just is, and each type of developer or development is serving a different type of client and population. Is there some analysis of those developer patterns, I guess they would be called? I don't know what to call it.
We have not done that, and Marcos, feel free to jump in, and Corin, I think that it would take time and maybe one of the real estate firms are doing this, but I think there would be a way to do it looking at owner addresses. But I think it would take some time. And the 90 days we had to do this plan, we have not focused on that.
Yeah, I imagine it would be pretty difficult to do, but I just feel like part of that understanding and education could be really valuable to understanding how to interrupt those cycles and how to make sure that ownership is staying somehow in the hands of local folks.
Yeah, that's a good point. And one of the initiatives that Phoenix has in their plan, which we don't have, but I think could possibly be added to our last initiative, is ongoing research. Like, make sure that you have good data. And I think that could be something we could look at. All right. And don't hesitate, this is a work in progress. So we do really want to focus more on the initiatives. And I see Liz just jumped in. One thing, I'll do an intro and turn it over to Liz. In terms of a lot of work went into the People, Communities, Homes investment plan. We didn't throw that out the window. We linked to the home section here. And I did want to just remind everybody that the PCHIP plan for the home section identified four key priorities for housing. Those are listed there on the left: increasing affordable rental housing, which includes preservation, expanding affordable home ownership, ensuring stable, healthy, and safe housing, and increase equitable housing. And there were strategies identified in that plan and goals and strategies within them. And part of the whole idea with that plan is how all of those interact with the strategies for people, really helping individuals and families succeed, and then communities, thinking about neighborhoods and the larger context. And so that plan was intentionally more general, but really showed the interconnectedness. This plan, and that plan actually I reread the home section recently. It says, hey, this isn't a detailed housing plan. The city should do a more detailed housing plan. So here we are. Purpose of this plan is really focusing on the preservation and construction of housing units. I had to keep reminding myself and going back to that because I kept wanting to sprinkle in things that were less related. And all of that being said, we did feel like it was important to recognize there are some key things that in supporting the preservation and construction that HCD feels like are important. One is focusing on residents that are most vulnerable to housing instability, aligning the policy actions with other key city initiatives such as climate resiliency, advancing racial and social equity, and supporting older adults. So that's sort of the framework in which we really thought through these initiatives. And now we are going to jump in, and some of these you've heard us talk about before, so we can go fairly quick, but just want to let you know where we're at with them.
Great. So for those of you that watched the presentation, you'll see this is probably one of the slides we changed the most based on the public input. One thing I will just say is the idea around transforming the public housing is very complicated, and the messaging on it is hard. So we tried to refine it a little bit to make it a little bit more straightforward. So public housing are those units that we own. HUD provides funding to operate public housing. Capital needs. Nationally, HUD has a real challenge to be able to meet all the capital needs of the housing that exists. And so over the past 10 years, HUD has really been encouraging housing authorities to look at other funding mechanisms also within HUD to be able to do that and to give more flexibility. So the first initiative is around addressing the capital needs of over 1,500 public housing units, transition to a more stable funding source offered through HUD and private financing, increase the number of units, and also to create homeownership opportunities. We know through our department has been receiving technical assistance from HUD and their contractors on how to lay out that plan. So the short-term goals is that we would create a repositioning plan to meet the objectives of increasing affordable housing and getting approval from the Board of Commissioners, and to submit the first rental assistance demonstration application to HUD, which would transition about 275 units from public housing financing to the rental assistance demonstration, which is more of a Section 8 model. So residents would not be displaced. There would be no impact to the tenant other than there may be improvements made to those units. There may be more opportunities for them to move and do other things. But it really is more around the quality of the housing and having a better and more stable funding source. Any questions on that? And Joe, you heard the first time, so does that sound better?
I think it's more clear. That's the kind of communication I was talking about that I really love getting from you, Nona, and learning more about that. So thank you. I believe it's more clear.
Great, thank you. The second initiative is around building capacity in Tucson around affordable housing. Many of you have already had some incredible conversations about this. We know that, and we've had past conversations that us as a public housing authority, we have not been actively developing, but as most other public housing authorities around the country that do a lot of development, one of the first short-term goal is to create a development arm to the department, but it's also to work in conjunction with our developers in that whatever development we're doing as a public-private partnership and utilizing those who have experience in development to help the city further affordable housing. And ongoing is looking at how can we support our community partners in development through technical assistance, training, and really building capacity with our small scale developers and doing that in a longer term fashion. The third initiative is one that Anne's going to talk about. So I'll let her do that.
And I will say I'm now working off the report and here based on the conversation with the Affordable Housing Subcommittee yesterday. I did actually add an action to this, and I'll talk about that. But so the short term, we're now going to have two actions. One of them is the one I'm adding in part because of the qualified allocation plan and the discussion we had earlier. In the qualified application plan, there's a section about how projects get points if they're in a city recognized revitalization area. And part of that is having an adopted plan recognizing those revitalization areas. And so we are working on the action says, and I'm pulling it up right now, adding an action called promote housing in key revitalization areas. And the city already has formally adopted some plans, but hasn't formally adopted others. And the hope here is by recognizing these in here and mayor and council adopting this, those areas will qualify. So the ones that we currently have are Thrive in the 05. Many of you are familiar with that. The Sunshine Mile overlay, where we have our first affordable housing density bonus. The Grant Road Investment District, Central Business District, South 12th, the La Doce redevelopment strategy, and then the FTA Equitable Transit Oriented Development planning area. And so our thinking there is we know that there are city investment in those areas. We know that let's take the transit corridors, that there in recognizing an equitable transit-oriented development approach, affordable housing is key to that. And so we are suggesting now, based on yesterday's conversation, that we add that as a strategy and just recognize that those areas are areas that we support more affordable housing happening. Okay, you can see the back to the thing. The other one is creating a checklist. We are in process. Laura, who's made the story map and incredible with GIS, is helping us quantify where affordable housing could be located, and really thinking about creating a score to help inform projects. And that would help inform our acquisition opportunities. It would also help inform projects that city would invest money in. And I will say there is some work that has to be done on that checklist. And I'm really hoping possibly that could be a working group from this commission, or possibly the Affordable Housing Subcommittee. There is an exercise we want to go through with you to help us in quantifying that. Something we can talk about next time, but we are actively working on creating a checklist to help inform projects. And I'll turn it back over to you, Liz.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know if I remember the numbers, what items are number 4.
Source of income protection.
Oh, that still under number 3. Okay, thank you. So this is an important discussion to have a medium-term goal to explore adding a protected class under the fair housing local ordinance. We have a local ordinance around who are protected against fair housing discrimination. And we there's many communities around the country that have what's called an income source protection. And so what that does is primarily, how it's been used is around people with Section 8 vouchers, people with Social Security, people with limited fixed incomes, that some landlords are right now able to say, I don't want to rent from you unless you have earned income. I don't want to rent from you if you have a Section 8 voucher. And so by having this potential ordinance, it would make more units available. A landlord could still screen for other things and make determinations on who they want to rent to. But if someone was to have something like a Section 8 voucher, that would be one thing they could not decline. So this is again just an exploration. There's not a city yet or municipality in Arizona that has this. And so this would really be something to look at and gather information around that. Question, Liz?
Yeah, I had a question. So is the source of income protection a strategy that's being implemented in this plan, or is it just an aspiration for this commission, or both?
So because there's a lot to understand about the impact and who and around this to really be able to inform whether this is something we should adopt. Right now it's set as a medium-term goal with the idea of exploring and putting together a recommendation to mayor and council if they want to adopt this ordinance. And I should just say, I'm sorry, Anne, it will be controversial. So it will not be something easily accomplished.
Yes, I'm fully aware. I know someone who just finally rented a house, and every single place they put in applications for, they were required to make 3 times the amount of rent and their income.
Right.
One thing that brought up is I didn't mention, so each of these actions under the policy initiatives are divided into short-term, medium-term, or ongoing. Short-term, we're thinking is less than 2 years. Medium-term, we're thinking 2 to 5 years, and then ongoing, something that we're likely doing now and will and want to continue to do. So that's those distinctions. And so this is where I appreciate, Jay, you mentioned the Housing Segregation Commission meeting before we go to mayor and council. Any input you all have in terms of that item, we're interested in hearing from you and incorporating that. All right. Preservation and enhancing existing housing. I'll jump in here quick. So this is, to me, I feel you've probably heard my bias that one of the best ways, I think, to keep people housed is to keep people in their current houses. And so this policy initiative is really focused on efforts to do that. Short term, with the accessory dwelling unit ordinance passing from mayor and council last month, and we'll talk about that more in the HCD update. HCD was directed as part of the motion to launch a pilot accessory dwelling unit improvement program. That is where we'd be helping homeowners who have either an ADU or a guest quarters improve that either with repairs or helping them build out kitchens and bathrooms. So that is something that we're looking at doing sooner than later. And then also looking to support more manufactured housing rehabilitation. So we do have a program now, but looking to either expand that and or trying to find vacant manufactured home units, repair them and get folks into those. So those are some short-term actions. And I'll say part of what we're trying to do here is tie these actions to the funding that mayor and council have allocated for state and local fiscal recovery. And so part of that is there is funding allocated for this manufactured home program. And so trying to have these things correlate. Medium term, this is a goal of mine, and something that Phoenix is doing is really creating a funding and supporting new rehabilitation for multifamily rental buildings. The city right now has our homeowner rehabilitation program. We, by and large, we are looking to also create one that can help more multifamily projects. So for instance, it could be, we help support multifamily residents that have low income Section 8, have low income renters and or Section 8 renters. And as part of that money, they have to continue to accept the vouchers. So that's the type of program we're looking at. And then ongoing, this is something that's going to be a challenge for Tucson and something that I think is important, working with the Arizona Department of Housing to identify and support continuing affordability terms of expiring projects. So in 1989, the Congress changed the LIHTC rules so that there were 30 years. So doing the math, we have a ton of projects that are reaching that 30 years. And so a priority is to really make sure that we try to keep those as affordable housing units and not have them go to market rate. All right, since we've done this a million times, Corin, do you want to jump in on these?
I am happy to. So we know that zoning is another aspect that has a really big impact on the feasibility of projects and affordability in the bottom line. So we want to look at how to make zoning regulations work better to create more affordable housing. One thing we want to do is just build on kind of the template we've put in place for Sunshine Mile, which Anne mentioned earlier, which is the first corridor where we have put in place an inclusionary housing program, basically a density bonus for projects that include affordable housing. We want to build on that and use that as part of our toolkit as we approach other corridors, other transit corridors across the city like Oracle and South 6th. And of course, fine tune that as we go to make sure it is producing units and producing mixed income developments that we want to see. And then we also want to look at how to promote, make sure that new affordable housing is of really high quality design, that it is not something that it's really differentiated as affordable housing, but that it's attractive, livable spaces for tenants. We also want to really foster a strong connection between how we're looking at affordability and climate adaptation as a community, because we see those as very linked. But that's someplace that we want to build out our toolkit, especially through zoning regulations and other development regulations, to make sure that we are thinking about those things cohesively, and that our regulations are aligned there. And then we are also looking at other ways to update our development standards, particularly zoning, to create tools that incentivize affordable housing. This could be looking at more flexibility on things like parking, lot coverage, setbacks, a lot of different aspects to just provide more flexibility for affordable housing projects, and potentially even a program that does provide some density or height bonuses for affordable housing projects in certain areas, potentially. So those are the strategies we're thinking about with zoning. And then we also are looking at the development review side of things in terms of the costs and the process there. So we're looking at ways to streamline the development review process for affordable housing projects, projects that qualify. Maybe you could qualify for expedited permitting. And we want to look at how to expand the affordable housing impact fee program. We're also looking at how to incentivize ADU construction, to create some innovative models around, partnerships that allow us to work with community members who might want to build an ADU and rent to a Section 8 tenant. Speaking of source of income discrimination, it'd be great to find folks who actually want to use their backyard to provide housing for a Section 8 tenant or formerly homeless individual. So there's a lot I think we can do there around ADUs to create some new models. And we're also looking at more innovative development and construction methods like modular homes, 3D printing, et cetera. Want to make sure our codes are flexible enough to allow these types of innovative construction methods that could be lower cost. And maybe even look at how to bring some demonstration projects and pilot projects to Tucson, partnering with our development community on that.
Speaking of it, this is the Habitat for Humanity 3D printed home in Tempe. I'd be curious to try to get them to the folks that were involved on that project. Let us know kind of what that looked like, how that's going, and what that process looked like. All right, we are on 7. There's 10 initiatives total. 7 is to develop affordable and mixed income housing on city-owned property. The city owns a lot of land, and so really thinking through utilizing that land to support the housing goals. So all of these are short-term. They're all of them are in the works, and so develop a phased development plan for existing city sites. And phase 1 sites are at the bottom, but we've been talking about potential other sites and really wanting to create a plan, letting people know which sites we expect to be working on and what those timeframes might be. We are also in the process of exploring the feasibility of city sites on Sunshine Mile, remnant parcels from the road widening, looking to see if they can support affordable housing projects. The third one, acquire new properties that align with city priorities. This is one of the things I'm really excited about with the state and local fiscal recovery funding. Mayor and council have allocated funding for HCD to acquire and think through programming for affordable housing projects. So we are actively looking at some potential sites and some potential options, prioritizing areas that we talked about before, where we're aligning with other work and/or thinking primarily about the transit corridors. And then those are the phase 1 sites right now are 3 sites we're working with in Ward 1 and 1 site where we're looking at doing a permanent supportive housing project in Ward 3. All right, back to you, Liz Morales. Oh, wait, Liz Wilson has a question.
sorry, I just had a question for the short-term goals. Are you going to be renovating the city-owned properties on Mojave, or are you doing a new build altogether?
We are currently planning on a new build. We did evaluate the condition, and we're thinking we would start from scratch, do a permanent supportive housing project in conjunction with our Tucson house rehabilitation. And so thinking that those two projects can help support each other.
Thank you.
All right, Liz Morales, this one's yours. Enhance effort aimed at housing Tucsonans most vulnerable to housing instability.
Thank you. And this really, circling back to the earlier conversation around permanent support, this could be where that goes. And so looking at understanding that, you know, we have different segments of our community. Persons experiencing homelessness is just one of those. We know persons, older adults are highly susceptible right now to the changing environment around rent and home ownership. And so thinking of the different populations, domestic violence, persons fleeing domestic violence. So there, when we're talking about those who are most vulnerable, those that may really struggle the most and are at most at risk. So clearly understanding that we should have some short-term goals. The first one is actually in the works. It's around supporting Emerge, who serves persons fleeing domestic violence and helping them expand their non-congregate units. Also, the Affordable Housing Alliance for Older Adults. There's a significant amount of work right now. They have a grant from Vitalist and developing some recommendations and strategies. And then supporting the small scale housing for youth and older adults. Those are some immediate things we can do. Also, medium term is around the rehabilitation of Tucson House. We'd love for that to be done tomorrow, but we know it's going to take us a little longer. So that's why it's medium term. And then ongoing, it's around the supporting of new permanent supportive housing projects. And so how do we want that to look is one of the reasons our subcommittee worked on that. So I thought I saw Jim hand up. Was it on this one, Jim?
Yeah, you answered my question.
Okay. And then number 9, pursuing funding streams for affordable housing. Again, this is work that I think is best done out of the commission around some of this ideas around how do we fund affordable housing. We have a housing trust fund, a local housing trust fund, reinstating that as a short-term goal, which also means how do we fund that housing trust fund. Medium-term, evaluating housing in a future bond election. And then ongoing, advocating for more state and federal funding, which again, all of you have been very active in discussion and in your advocacy. So those are the initiative and some goals around this item. Any questions on that? Okay.
So the one thing
I don't know a lot about bonds, but are certain bonds eligible for only certain purposes, or can they be allocated for anything by ballot measure?
So I'm not going to be a good person to answer that question because I don't know a heck of a lot. I don't know if Ann or Corin, if any of you have some comments around that.
This is Betty.
Oh, Betty.
Yeah, yes.
You know. She knows.
Yeah. We, let's see, in 1999 and 2004, the county went to the voters who approved housing, general obligation bond funds for affordable housing. And when we did that, we weren't really sure how to, we got the bonds approved, and then we didn't know what we could do with it. So with that, we had also a commission, and we were able to go to the state and make some changes in state legislature that would allow us to spend those funds. So the mechanism is now there for us to use bond funds, general obligation bond funds for affordable housing. You do have to be really careful with how you, if you go to the voters, you have to be really careful in how you actually present the question to the voters. Because however that question is phrased, that's what ties you to what you can do with those funds, first of all. And so the first time all we could do was infrastructure in the public right of way. So how can we do that and still build affordable housing? Well, we used development. The first funds that are the hardest to get for many developers at the time was the infrastructure funding. So we were able to use the first $5 million in projects just in the infrastructure. The second time we went out, we changed the way the question was asked and what we could do with that. So as long as we could show that there was a public benefit, we can use bond funding for affordable housing. But again, you have to really be careful with how you state your question and how you present it to the voters, because whatever you present to the voters, it has to, there's no going around, and making any changes after the fact. So it can be done. Marcos, I think, is on the call too. Him and I worked on this project together for a long time. We spent $25 million, I think it was, on affordable housing. I don't know how many units, like close to 300 units. It was a 10-to-1 leverage, private investment with public investment. And so it is something that works. And I would, I'm not sure. I know in the past, the city didn't have the capacity to do that much in general obligation bond funds, but that may have changed now. And it would be great if the city could go out for a voter approved bond program for affordable housing.
I will say this came up in the Affordable Housing Subcommittee yesterday, and Shay, feel free to jump in, but something that subcommittee has expressed an interest in working on. And we know we discussed Austin's $250 million housing bond that they passed as part of a major transit bond that went to voters. So yeah, it can be done, but would take a lot of advocacy and work.
And lawyers.
Yeah, we talked about the need for marketing and messaging, exactly what you're saying, Betty, that one in Austin was really successful because they got the real estate realtors to chip in $10,000 for marketing for that. So I agree. I feel like the messaging would be key, and really trying to also, use the political, because it feels like people are generally supportive, but tend to get lost in the weeds. So if there was a way that we could make it, just accessible, I feel like the political moment is right, considering the funding that's available and everything that's happening.
Okay, I'm going to keep going as I'm cognizant of the time. So the last policy initiative, and this is where maybe we do include information on research here, just thinking about some of the thoughts and concerns with the data, but expanding education and outreach efforts. So short term, thinking there is the Housing Resource Connection Program, and that is also part of the state and local fiscal recovery funding that mayor and council are supporting, having there be kind of a one-stop shop trying to help people find housing and with housing, and Liz, feel free to jump in. And then ongoing, we do have some efforts at education, but I think those efforts could really be expanded. So, you know, there is a misperception about Section 8 vouchers and tenants, and really trying to improve the reputation of that program. This is that picture there is one of our Section 8 landlords who talks about how the program's been really successful in his eyes, and as a landlord. Then property tax reductions, exemptions programs. This is something that I feel like comes up in every neighborhood meeting I'm in, that people aren't aware that there are existing programs that exist for seniors and for older adults and for historic districts. And so something that we could look to expand. And then of course, our other housing programs. I mentioned we have funding for homeowner rehabilitation for low-income households, programs like that, helping get the word out, our lead paint programs, etc. So that is the initiatives. Liz Morales, anything to jump in there?
No, just we gave you a lot, but hopefully enough that you can make some notes on things you liked, didn't like, and would love to hear your feedback.
And I will also, these are similar to what you saw last month. So again, I'll walk through this pretty quickly in terms of the funding. It's just shown a little bit different. And what I will focus on, because many of those actions were specific, and they were specific because of this. This is the funding that mayor and council have outlined for state and local fiscal recovery funding for the next year. There's about a little over $9 million going towards promoting affordable and stable housing. And so some of those actions, the hope here is to really align actions with that funding. There's not enough funding to do everything that we're saying we want to do in this plan. But at least thanks to this support, I think that we will be able to make more progress than we've seen in a while. The other thing I want to say is the short-term action plan section. So the thinking there is for any of these policy initiatives, and I'm going to go to give an example. So we'll go here. Building capacity in Tucson around affordable housing development. There's a short-term goal and there's an ongoing goal. The final section of this plan, and online, it may actually be incorporated so that you can toggle back and forth, will be an action plan for any of the short-term goals and the ongoing goals to really help lay out how is the city gonna achieve what is the steps taken to make that action happen, including in many cases, there's kind of an immediate request or consideration for mayor and council to consider taking an action that will help make those happen sooner than later. So that's what we're envisioning, how we're building that out to really put some meat behind those short-term actions. And the thinking will be that we'll be able to track that online so people can see progress as we move along. So that was a lot. Thoughts, questions, concerns?
Speaking personally, I would say that you guys are doing an amazing job here. I've heard from several developers who attended the strategy session last week who said they've not worked in Tucson, but just based on the tone and the approach you guys have, they think that the city of Tucson is really going to be doing some amazing things. So I applaud the work that you're doing and appreciate it. And I appreciate the involvement in terms of bringing in the community and getting feedback from everybody that you have. So I think it's making a really well-rounded, thought-through plan. Does anybody else have a comment? One of the things we were hoping for is to get a recommendation to Mayor and council to approve the strategies shown in this draft plan. So I guess I'd like to open it up for comments.
This is Betty. I'm so sorry I had to jump off and on, so I know I missed a lot of this, and maybe this was covered and I just wasn't really, wasn't here when it was covered. But is there a plan to work with nonprofit housing developers to build capacity for these nonprofits?
So I'll jump in, and we do, one of the initiatives is around capacity building, both within the Housing and Community Development Department, but also with our community housing providers, especially those that are small scale and nonprofits, to help develop their capacity. So yes, we definitely have that as one of the goals under that strategy.
Yeah, I think one of the areas that really needs to happen for the small scale development and for home ownership opportunities is to really build back better, right? Build back the capacity of our housing providers, our nonprofit housing developers that did this work in the past and then transitioned to the foreclosure, and we lost a lot of that. So it's really important to do, to bring that back,
Yeah. And I would 100% agree. The one thing I would say is one of the conversations Anne has had in the past meetings is that, we get a portion of our home is for community housing development organizations, which we refer to as CHODOs.
Right.
We where there once used to be multiple CHODOs, we're down to maybe one that has been able to access those funds. Those are funds we cannot touch unless we can demonstrate there is so it is imperative that we continue to bring back our local providers to get them to that point of being able to.
So is that a strategy? Is that one of the strategies in there?
Housing develop. So we could certainly be more clear about that. But that really is in essence, and I don't know how, because I know we talk about developing capacity of the local, but I don't know if we go that far.
Yeah, I would say, and this is good feedback in terms of what level of detail to put here. We do have it in the written report in more detail, but here trying to keep this pretty succinct, but we can make that more explicit.
Mark.
Thanks. So I'm having a trouble seeing how this concern we have fits into the plan, because the plan can't be all things to everybody, but we're definitely seeing a pretty significant increase in the number of older adults that are coming to us that are really needing relocation support. That even when they may have a Section 8 voucher, their landlords have canceled their contracts, and we're working pretty closely with city staff, and we appreciate that, but we're finding need for more money than we would traditionally spend on providing assistance to people, just with things like moving and of course deposits and stuff like that. So like I said, I think this plan really is about increasing the stock, which is obviously the long-term solution, but trying to deal with some of these sort of short-term, immediate crises are gonna, I suspect, be a problem for the near term, and it's not anything that we've really seen before. So just wanted to put that out. It's a great plan. Thank you all for your hard work on it.
Thank you.
So I guess the question I have for the group is there, any recommendations on what should be added to the plan, or anything that any of you think that we should remove from the plan? So going back to the Housing First Subcommittee, there was a recommendation that that permanent supportive housing be added as a priority. That would be something that I think could be added. Is there anything else that any other suggested changes? Mark?
No, that was me scratching my head.
Oh.
And not taking down my hand.
I know that something that we had discussed early on in the commission was addressing displacement. And I know that it's kind of alluded to by saying keeping people in their homes, but I don't know if there are any explicit goals regarding displacement and gentrification.
On that, that's part of the challenge here. Is in the PCHIP plan, we did talk a lot about that. And so thinking about how to focus on housing, I would say there's not much in here regarding that. And I would refer people back to PCHIP. But again, just trying to keep this pretty focused on preservation and construction of units to help with the overall picture.
And I would say in a roundabout way, part of what the funding around acquisition is to help address the need to help deal with potential future development that could displace. So the more acquisition we can do, the more we can develop housing to that would be a resource to those that could potentially be displaced. So I kind of to echo what Anne's saying, I think there's further work that this commission can do around that. But the more we can ensure affordability across the city, the better we can address when people are displaced. So I think, Liz, that it's a very good comment. It could easily come up, but maybe as part of the commission is to say, we still want to continue working on that. We think this will help address some of those issues.
So in the interest of time here, I'm going to make a suggested motion, and maybe somebody will volunteer to be the author of it. But the motion would be to recommend to mayor and council approval of the strategies and the HAST plan with maybe with a focus on permanent supportive housing, with maybe a more emphasis on permanent supportive housing.
And capacity building for nonprofit housing developers or providers, I should say.
And capacity building for, say that again, Betty?
Capacity building for nonprofit housing providers and developers.
Okay.
And there's a comment from Maggie. She'd like to see more specific on affordable housing strategies.
Okay, so would, go ahead, Liz.
No, I'm sorry. I was just going to say it may be, so there is some things in there. I'm just not sure based on that comment, Maggie, what you'd like to see. I think we'd like some feedback on that.
Hi, everybody. Sorry I was a little late, but I think I feel, community land trust is a tool in our community that, we need to, I think, use more often, especially in the development of affordable housing. It's a model that is working as far as building permanent affordable housing. And I'd like to see just more programs. I guess if we're talking about affordable housing and we're going to be providing, subsidies, the idea that we ensure that these units are affordable for, 40, 50, 60, and in the case of the community land trust, 99 plus years, it makes a lot of sense, when we have limited funds for affordable housing to ensure that, we're making them affordable for forever. And that, also includes the shared equity component and, other kind of things that we need to take into consideration. But, and I always hesitate to say anything because I feel like I'm just, being self-serving, but I really do believe in the model that I work at every day, and it works. So, thank you.
Okay, so going back to the motion, is there anybody that would like to make that motion?
It have to be, who are the voting? Oh, sorry.
Okay, thank you, Liz.
I move to recommend the aforementioned topics and that this house plan be approved by mayor and council or consider.
Thank
well,
you.
Remember, this is draft, so you should recommend approval of the draft, the first draft affordable housing strategy plan as presented, with the recommendations made by.
Correct. I thought that's what was said, but I agree. That is the intent. Is there a second?
This is Jay Young. I second.
Thank you, Jay. Any discussion before we put it to vote? Okay, Michael Edmonds.
Yes.
Olga Flores. Is Olga still with us? Looks like Olga dropped off. Shay?
Aye.
Liz Wilson?
Aye.
Jay Young?
Aye.
Lori Meservo?
Aye.
The ayes have it. Okay, that was good. That was a good discussion. Took a little bit longer, but I think it was time well spent. Our next agenda item is agenda item number 8, which is the Housing Commission updates. And Liz and Ann, I'm going to just ask that we try to keep this as short as possible because we are running over now.
Yeah, I think I can, most of this we can talk about next month. The only thing I did want to do is give Corin a chance to update the ADU ordinance as it relates to our efforts there with the plan. But that's timely. I think everything else can wait till next month unless Liz Morales, you have anything else?
I have nothing else.
Okay, Corin.
Sure, I just want to give everyone an update that since we last met, Mayor and Council did approve the ADU code amendments. That was approved on October 19th. So that code amendment will now allow accessory dwelling units or casitas in Tucson. And they made a few small changes to the height of ADUs that's permitted, but that was really about it. They also gave staff direction to really continue focusing on affordability. That was, I think, one of the key priorities for Mayor and Council was to develop programs and partnerships to really make ADUs affordable. Now, since that vote on October 19th, there has been a request by Councilmember Paul Cunningham for a reconsideration of that vote, which has been added to the agenda next week on Tuesday, November 9th. So Paul has asked for reconsideration of a few aspects, the ADU size and the owner occupancy requirements, which there's no owner occupancy requirements at this time. So a potential addition to the code to require some level of owner occupancy. So that will be on Mayor and Council's agenda next week. Vote whether to reconsider their motion. If they do choose to reconsider the ordinance, there would be another public hearing, and that would be held probably December 7th.
Thank you, Corin. Congratulations and good job getting that through.
Thank you all. I think it was really helpful to have the input of this commission. Many of you were involved, not just through these meetings, but through the stakeholder group and doing a lot of advocacy for this amendment. So thanks to everybody for being involved. And yeah, there's still clearly a little more to work out, but hopefully we'll all continue to follow the process.
Hey, Jim, this is Jay. Again, I'd like to make a quick comment about the ADU ordinance and kind of what's happening with that. And that is just, I think as a commission, it shows that, if we really get into affordable housing and we really start to look at ways to develop more affordable housing, I think we're going to run into a lot of NIMBYism. And I feel like that's what this is about. And I think it's something we really need to be conscientious of, and talking about whether it's how we're explaining things to the public or marketing things. It's just critical. I feel like the ADU ordinance is low-hanging fruit in terms of something we can do for affordable housing. And so it's just really concerning to me that what it feels like a small group of people is really pushing back on something that is beneficial to many more people than it potentially harms. I don't really think it harms anybody. So I just want to put that out there to the group. I think if we really make progress and we really kind of push the envelope in terms of affordable housing, we need to be prepared for this kind of backlash. So just kind of want to put a pin in that and for us to be prepared to deal with that as we move forward. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, next agenda item is number 9. Our next meeting date and time will be December 2nd. A representative from the clerk's office will be in attendance, and please have your subcommittees meet before our next commission meeting. We do have the site visit on the 19th. Are there any other suggestions for agenda items for our next meeting? Okay, great. Well, we are adjourned. Thank you. It's 6:05 p.m. I think this was a great meeting. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks all.
Thank you.